7, which would regulate the sale of kratom. I thought for a minute it was kryptonite.
For some people. Again, I didn't bring my furry friend today, so I feel like I'm at a disadvantage. Chairperson Houck, thank you for holding a hearing on House Bill 5477, the Kratom Consumer Protection and Regulatory Act. Thank you to the Regulatory Reform Committee for the opportunity to testify on my bill. Kratom, or metragenine, I'll set the purpose and give an overview, and I have some stakeholders who can speak more broadly to the topic. Kratom was brought to my attention as a substance of concern nearly 2 years ago by a constituent. They shared their concerns that kratom was being sold in our community with big promises and little user guidance. I was personally concerned as a member of the Warren Centerline Prevention Coalition, a group of community leaders committed to educate our youth and prevent use and abuse of drugs that can derail our young people from achievement and success. Conversations in my community have revealed that our concerns are not isolated. I have heard that in the substance use recovery community, kratom is being marketed as a holistic solution for those in recovery from opioid addiction. While in the health and wellness community, kratom is being marketed as both something that can be taken to give you more energy, as well as something that can be used as a relaxant aid. At the time, kratom packaging had no guidance for how much kratom to take, no dosage, the potency of the product, no amount of milligrams to consume, necessarily what kratom brand it was, whether it was a white, green, or red kratom, which further differentiates its effects, how often to use it, or the frequency not to be exceeded, how kratom should be consumed, whether in a capsule, a tea, or other methods, no reference to potential side effects or drug interactions. Research has been conducted by respected medical institutions such as the Mayo Clinic and have identified some of the following concerns. 130 people in 38 states have become ill with salmonella, and 35 deaths have been related to salmonella poisoning from kratom. Kratom has been compared to marijuana and opioids, supplements, alcohol, and those entities which can lead to dependency. As I researched kratom, I learned of the many perspectives on what kratom is and how it should be handled. Some government entities are waiting for the World Health Organization to issue an outright ban, which the WHO decided not to ban for insufficient scientific evidence. Recognition that substances that are outright banned unless they are lethal or life-limiting, instead of being regulated, are often driven underground into black markets to fuel illicit crime and are ripe for being laced with potentially deadly substances such as fentanyl. The Food and Drug Administration has attempted to have kratom added as a Schedule I drug, which the DEA has the final determination, and in 2016, the DEA deemed kratom not to meet this criterion and therefore at no point can intercede. Many states are currently working to decriminalize the use of marijuana, which is federally still a Schedule I substance, but many people don't agree that this is an accurate classification. So where does kratom fit? Some states have banned kratom: Wisconsin, Indiana, Arizona, Vermont, and Alabama. Some states have imposed age restrictions, such as Minnesota, Illinois, and Tennessee. Other states have opted to restrict and regulate kratom, which has made the most sense in understanding how it is being used and at times abused. Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Oregon, and Utah have taken these approaches, and similar legislation is currently being considered by the Kansas legislature. After much consideration, discussion, and deliberation about kratom, we have worked to develop the Kratom Consumer Protection and Regulatory Act that I believe will serve Michigan's consumers, restricting use to adults 21 or older, labeling potential side effects, accountability for production and distribution, and limit tainted products from being sold to consumers. Michigan can empower those who choose to use kratom and make informed decisions. Individuals who have underlying tendencies towards addiction can avoid substituting one addiction for another. Kratom use and a need for regulation is not a partisan issue. Our office has worked across the aisle to refine legislation and identify regulatory language that can have an impact on kratom use. I have invited several speakers to explain the impact of kratom use in the community and the production and sale of kratom.
Thank you. If you just like to go that way, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark.
Thank you, Chair Houck and members of the committee for this opportunity. My name is Mac Haddo. I'm the Senior Fellow on Public Policy with the American Kratom Association. We represent consumers, not vendors. Kratom is a tropical plant grown principally in Southeast Asia, been used there safely for centuries. It came to the United States just after the Vietnam War as our soldiers came home and found it to be an effective pain reliever and energy boost, and they were using it frequently by self-importing it into the United States, and it grew in popularity. In 2009, there were reports of 9 deaths in a 12-month period in Sweden that drew the attention appropriately of every public health official in the world and led the FDA to begin accumulating evidence about the safety profile of kratom. They continued for about a 7-year period, documented there were 44 deaths globally that were attributed to kratom consumption. And in 2016, the FDA submitted its application for kratom to be a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act. The Drug Enforcement Administration rejected that recommendation based on inadequate evidence, led by 51 members of the House of Representatives in Congress, 25 Democrats, 26 Republicans, and by 13 members of the United States Senate. And to give you an idea of the bipartisan nature, at the time, Senator Orrin Hatch, arguably one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate at the time, signed the letter rejecting the ban, and Bernie Sanders, who without question is one of the most liberal members, joined together in defending the consumer's right to have access to safe kratom products. The issue, however, didn't go away because in 2017, the FDA submitted a second application. That was reviewed by the Department of Health and Human Services, and then Assistant Secretary for Health, Brett Giroir, rejected in a scathing letter indicating that the FDA had failed to meet its burden for scheduling. Undeterred, the FDA then went to the World Health Organization through the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, a lesser standard internationally for banning of substances, and on 11-1 vote in December of 2021, the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence rejected that recommendation because of insufficient evidence. The problem is adulteration of products. And going back to the Sweden deaths, all 9 were caused by an adulterant that was added to that kratom product, odesmethyltramadol, which is the chemical used in the production of tramadol, a powerful opioid. That was true in all of the 44 deaths when the National Institutes on Drug Abuse evaluated those deaths reported by the FDA. All were either polydrug use or adulterated kratom products. Today in the United States, the 6 states that banned kratom, all between 2011 and 2016, are now reviewing that. In the state of Wisconsin, on a 9-2 vote in early January, the State Affairs Committee voted to repeal the ban and report it to the House. It's expected for a vote on the House floor on Wednesday. In Oregon, it passed unanimously in the House. It went to the Senate. I think we lost 2 votes in the Senate. It was vetoed by the governor last year only because she wanted it to go to a different regulatory agency that would have better control over the sale of kratom products at retail outlets and wanted it to be under the control of the Department of Revenue, and she has promised to sign it. In Missouri, I'm told today that the Kratom Consumer Protection Act will be voted on this afternoon. Last year, it was voted out unanimously by the House because we protect consumers. It was on the unanimous consent calendar in the Senate when the Missouri Senate blew up. In Texas, the same thing, and that was over a Medicaid issue, by the way. Texas, same thing. Overwhelming votes. It only died because of the battle over voting rights legislation. In the state of Ohio, last week, it passed the House 82-9. Because of these protections that are essential to keep these adulterated products off of the market, which NIDA agrees, which HHS agrees, and that the U.S. Congress over the last 3 appropriations bills has said that kratom should remain available to consumers because of the benefits that some people experience that Representative Stone referenced, and that is, according to a Johns Hopkins University study of adult kratom users who are struggling with addiction issues, they found that 87% reported that they had a reduction in their withdrawal symptoms. They found that 35% were opioid-free within a year using kratom. The most significant thing is that safety profile, and if it's used responsibly, if it is labeled appropriately, making consumers aware of the potential risk. And you're going to hear some of my colleagues here talk about how important that is when you struggle with addictions. We concur at the American Kratom Association that that's what should happen to protect consumers. We think that vendors have to act responsibly. There are some vendors who welcome the AKA's involvement because we have called for GMP standards to be followed, and we have over 24 manufacturers who now subscribe to the GMP program, which requires that they follow FDA GMP standards in the production of kratom products and all submit to an independent third-party audit. Their competitors in the marketplace today are spiking kratom with fentanyl, morphine, and heroin, all for the economic advantage against their competitors, all that put consumers at risk. And that has to end. And we hope that you will enact the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, which provides that every kratom product that is introduced for sale in this great state will be subject to compliance standards, and the vendors welcome it because it provides for cleaning up a marketplace that otherwise is devastated by these adulterated products. We hope that you will support the Kratom Consumer Protection Act and join the 5 states that have enacted it so far, the dozens that are looking now deliberating it in this legislative sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Make sure you press the little red button there so we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and the rest of the committee, for allowing me to give testimony today. My name is Mark Kilgore, and I'd like to share first with all of you that I am a person in long-term recovery from a substance use disorder. And what that means for me if I has not used drugs or alcohol since July of 1998. Today, I now work with recovery community organizations around the whole state of Michigan. The program I work for is based out of Fraser. And I just wanted to share with you what I'm seeing in my world. I'm working with people out in the community that are suffering with a substance use disorder, seeking recovery, seeking treatment. We're finding that some people, not all, they hear the stories that kratom does help with the opioid withdrawals. Okay, I can't argue the fact. That's their pathway to their recovery. It may help them, but are they using it accordingly? Are they getting tainted kratom? Are they overusing it? Did they end up substituting one substance for another? I have met several people that have experienced dependency on kratom and addiction. Some treatment centers may not know how to deal with withdrawal symptoms from kratom. To me, this concerns me. I agree with the regulation of it, that it should be tested for impurities and additives. We're getting enough fentanyl deaths today without adding another substance on the street that is getting fentanyl added to it. A lot of treatment centers, people may not go in and share that their drug of choice is kratom. So they don't really know how to treat these people. The warning labels need to be added, which is in this bill, which my friend here is going to talk about some of that in a minute. And I think it does need to be regulated with all the warnings to educate people on the potential for dependency and addiction to a vulnerable population that are hearing stories that, oh, this is like the cure-all if you're addicted to opiates. And that is not the case. They should be aware of the potential of harm with some people, not all. And dosing, how to use it. If you look at these packaging, it doesn't even tell you how to dose. So my concern is I have a person that belongs to the group that I run that brought this to my attention a little over a year ago. His nephew tried kratom for the first time, ended up having severe seizures, and ended up in ICU. That's a concern. That's when we thought, we need to check into this and see how it can be regulated, check for impurities, additives. So I would just like to say I am in support of the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for allowing our testimony today. So the information that I'll be providing here is more on the data side of it. So we'd like to provide you with some data points so that you guys can consider this Protection Act. In 2017 alone, there were 152 deaths that were individually tested positive according to their for kratom, according to the toxicology reports sent to the CDC. Interesting point is one of the life-saving drugs that help reduce overdoses to opiates, Narcan, is one that can be used to reduce an overdose to kratom. The same opiate chemical structure is found within the opiate or within the kratom. Additionally, some other information that we want to provide here is from the National Institution on Drug Abuse. So one of the reports that they sent out is a National Drug Early Warning System. This information was pulled from Wayne County, so this is here locally here in Michigan, and we see in 2019, this was the second year that kratom deaths had increased. So only one of those deaths that were reported in 2019 was solely linked to kratom use. However, 16 deaths had the kratom ingredient as the lead cause of death. So that is an increase from 2018, where we only saw 10. Now, once again, I'm referring to a smaller community in Wayne County. Now, if we were to take more information from the state of Michigan, we would have to wonder what that data would look like. I only drew that little information. Additionally, the thing that I wanted to address today is the differencing in packaging. So I have two examples here today of kratom that can be bought here in Michigan. Bought this just down the road today here in East Lansing, and I bought this one back where we live in Macomb County. And what you see on the packaging is, for one, there's no clear warning labels. Each warning label is a little bit different. So on this package, I'll read it, and it says, "For only use as botanical, this manufacturing distributor takes no responsibility for the misuse of this product." And it says, "Not for sales to minor." So that's what this product says. Now, if we look at this product here, this is from Boost Kratom. This is a little bit better. I'll admit that this one's a little bit better. So the disclaimer reads, "You must be 18 or 21, depending on the state regulation, to buy this product. Do not use this product if you're pregnant or nursing. This product may impair your ability to drive or operate machinery. Always consult your physician prior to taking any herbal products. The Food and Drug Administration has neither reviewed these statements nor approved this product for consumption. It is not known to diagnose or treat or cure prevented diseases." So clearly we have an issue in labeling, and that's where we come in and say that there needs to be some sort of regulation around kratom that addresses the labeling. An additional point that I'll make here is, when I read this labeling on this one, the disclaimer, it is incredibly small. It takes a lot of effort for me as a consumer, a potential consumer, to look and read this little packaging. It blends into the package. It's not very easily read. So we believe that there is a strong need to regulate the sale of kratom that allows consumers to safely use it, and additionally address the concern for potential habit forming.
So in closing, I recognize for the general public, this may be the first time that people are learning of kratom. And I've shared with most of you some informational fact sheets to help build awareness in the legislature, as well as information that can be brought back to your communities to have discussions with health professionals, substance use and recovery communities, health and wellness communities, community leaders, as well as parents. Criminalization is not the solution to every situation. In this case of kratom, I believe information, education, and regulation will empower those who produce kratom, those who sell kratom, and those who consume kratom to make more informed decisions and to mitigate potential harms. Thank you for your consideration. We'll take questions.
Thank you. We have some questions, but before we get to that, Mac, we have your name. Could you two please introduce yourself again to make sure? Did you put cards in by any chance?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, my name is Mark Kilgore,
Okay. How do you spell your last name?
Kilgore.
And then my name is Ryan, last name Reblin, R-E-B as in boy, L-I-N.
Okay, thank you. All right, up next, we have a question from Representative Outman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I find this discussion pretty fascinating. Prior to about a week ago, when Representative Stone brought this to my attention, I'd never heard of kratom before. It sounds kind of cool, but sounds also a little sketchy at the same time. But doesn't sound like it's a new phenomenon. It sounds like it's been around for a long time, just kind of operated in some of these gray areas that we have. But I do agree. I do like that you're not banning this substance, because a lot of times that does tend to lead to black market sales and such forth. So my one question that I had was partially answered, and that was related to who the dealers would be. And it sounds like any sort of retailer that applies for the license would be able to be a dealer. But my next question is, would wholesalers and other folks be allowed to sell this as well? Actually, never mind. It looks like here in Section 3, line 5 and 6, it does lay that out. Actually, scratch
So
that question.
Representative, I think the key part is that any product that's introduced for sale in the state of Michigan would have to be compliant with the statute, which is the key part, whoever sells it, so that the consumer would have confidence that when they purchase it, they have a low risk of getting an adulterated product if it's compliant with state law.
Yeah, it's all laid out right here. So thank you for that response. One of two other questions. Has the federal government indicated whether they plan to pursue another effort to label kratom as a controlled substance, to your knowledge?
Yes, the Controlled Substances Act is very specific in the criteria that's required for the scheduling of any substance, including kratom, and definitively HHS and NIDA has withdrawn its support for any scheduling. The FDA has no basis with current science, and in 2018, Assistant Secretary Giroir pointed out that emerging science at the time indicated the FDA was wrong. He called it disappointingly poor evidence and data. Since then, since 2018, there have been more than 100 new peer-reviewed published articles that document the safety profile of kratom and its potential health benefits. So there's very little likelihood there would be any effort on a federal level. They've lost twice under the Controlled Substances Act in an effort to schedule, and at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs. We need to regulate it to keep the bad actors out, but it's going to be otherwise available.
Sure, and thank you for that response, Mac. And lastly, because this is so new to me, and I really have zero knowledge of this drug or substance, however you want to refer to it as. Has trends showed an increase in the use of this drug? I saw an interesting study here recently that the correlation between like stimulus checks and other factors given the last couple of years throughout the pandemic has increased the use of opioid deaths. Do you see a correlation between that and the use of kratom? Have we seen trends increase in the use of consumers?
In 2016, it was estimated that there were 3 to 5 million kratom consumers in the United States. About a third use it like you would a cup of coffee for increased energy and focus. Another third use it because it reduces anxiety. The final third, and that's a growing part of the population, is for people that struggle with addiction issues and pain, acute and chronic pain. Today, there are estimated 12 to 15 million consumers, perhaps in part as a perverse outcome of the FDA's drawing attention to it for the various purposes for which people are finding it useful. But we also have found that there's an explosion of information that's now available to consumers who are seeking some kind of a remedy that's safe. And so there's been an explosion of use of kratom, and unfortunately, concurrently, an explosion of interest by bad actors to adulterate products to get an advantage in the marketplace by spiking their products to give you a euphoric high, which the natural kratom plant does not provide. It doesn't suppress your respiratory system, but an adulterant does, therefore putting consumers at greater risk. It also tastes terrible, and so it's not attractive to kids unless it's spiked. And then they get that high. And by the way, kratom's expensive, and so if you're a kid looking for a high, you can get a cheaper alternative on the street corner. You're not going to seek it from kratom.
Sure. I
Okay,
might have
thank
to
you.
investigate this use.
Thank you, Representative. Next up, we have Representative Mueller.
So just a quick question. the stuff is already legal, correct? Like it's not illegal. My only concern is we're going to introduce yet another, so-called drug that has the the possibility of withdrawal symptoms from some of the reading I've done. Pregnant women who take kratom, their babies can go through withdrawal if they're taking it inappropriately, and it looks like he bought it at a gas station. And if it has those type of properties in it where it causes withdrawal, when you mentioned Narcan, that kind of makes me a little bit nervous because, opiates, and, I've had to give people Narcan. I'm a former police officer, so you guys know where I'm coming from. And so, I'm interested in learning more about it, but, just to let you know, I have some red flags. Anytime we bring in any type of substance that could cause addiction properties, we're going to have problems. We just had a hearing in judiciary about medical marijuana in treatment courts. So, we're going to be going down that slippery slope of, okay, as long as this stuff is regulated, we're going to be legal. So next thing you know, we're going to regulate is shrooms. Then it's going to be cocaine. Then it's going to be this. So I think we have to take a very narrow look at this kind of stuff, or we're going to open the floodgates to potential disaster for addiction. We already have a problem with addiction in our country.
So Reverend Mueller, could I just respond? We believe that you should follow the science. The National Institute on Drug Abuse commissioned 2 studies independent of one another on the addiction liability of kratom. Both of those studies, and by the way, you can become dependent. It's like anything else. It's from the coffee family. It's like caffeine. You become dependent on it. And you can have, therefore, withdrawal symptoms. They're not the same as an opioid withdrawal. They're vastly different. But the 2 studies done by NIDA on the addiction liability issue found that there's no significant addiction liability, both studies, and they found that it actually reduced the cravings for the reference drug in those studies, morphine. So that's why you see benefits reported by Johns Hopkins University. The critical issue here is whether we, as you appropriately say, we don't want to trade one thing for another in terms of addictions. In this case, the addiction liability is far less. And then if you look at what its effects are on the brain, it is what's called a partial agonist. Doesn't go to that euphoric high center that opioids do. It doesn't go to your respiratory system. So Narcan in pure kratom would be completely ineffective because it doesn't suppress your respiratory system, and that's been documented by the science. If it's spiked with fentanyl, heroin, or morphine, you obviously need Narcan because you're treating that drug rather than the pure kratom, the plant.
Just really quick, so with that package, you buy it at a gas station or?
So both of these so short answer, yes, you can purchase both of these packages at gas stations. However, I got this one from Wild Bill's Tobacco.
Okay, so could someone potentially just go in and take a bunch of those and get sick?
I guess I'm confused by the question, but
Like if I went in there and took 10 capsules, am I going to get sick?
Yes.
I mean, I can eat 10 gummies and I'm just going to be high.
It makes you sick and you
Right?
throw up. Yes.
So,
it does.
but I can eat 10 gummies and just be high. I eat 10 of those, I could get sick and start having withdrawal issues. So that's the difference between. That's what I'm trying to say. I just don't want to introduce something more into our society that is an addictive property.
So Representative Mueller, you would not get sick from its psychoactive properties. You get sick because it has a bad taste and you have a gastrointestinal effect. Like anything else you take too much of, you would throw it up. I didn't mean to suggest that you would throw it up or have it get sick because you become addicted to it, or it's because it has a psychoactive property, which taking too much would get you in one sitting. That's not the fact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Representative Yancey.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. I believe I heard testimony that people are not likely to admit that they are users of kratom. Is that correct? So how are we assessing what the need is to regulate?
Well, let me just step in. I don't think that a lot of healthcare workers might be well informed on this. So it's not necessarily something that they're inquiring about if they're addressing addiction issues.
So
Did you want to add to that?
So healthcare workers are identifying.
So when you go to seek assistance and they're asking, what are you taking? What are you potentially, abusing? If this isn't part of what they're considering, then it's just flying under the radar.
So what is the approximate, need or usage of this product in Michigan? Do we know?
So 2 things, Representative Yancey. First is that a peer-reviewed study published by Dr. Oliver Grundmann and colleagues on consumer behaviors of kratom use in the United States indicated that 47% report their kratom use to their doctors when they visit. So, and we're seeing that climbing. People, as they become more familiar with it, if you are going into an addiction recovery center, you may be less likely to disclose what you're using. In fact, you may volunteer kratom and not disclose that you're using these other substances. That's more likely than not. So I think that's a critical part of this. In terms of the consumer behavior, based on the peer-reviewed published literature about, we don't have a nationally projectable study. There are probably 200,000 or 300,000 citizens of Michigan that are purchasing kratom based on the data we've gotten from vendors and from studies that have been done about consumer use.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all. Thank you, good colleague. So you guys just said it's expensive. I've been waiting on somebody to tell me how much that stuff costs.
That's a fair question. So this pack right here is $13.77 for this pack. That's how much I paid today.
How many of those capsules are in there?
There are 65 capsules.
And how often are you supposed to take those capsules, or recommended, suggested?
So that's one of the lead issues here is there is no recommended on the packaging, at least on how much you should take. From consumers that we have spoken to, they generally take it until they don't feel they get sick, and then they kind of walk back. On this packaging, this is a little bit cheaper. This is $10, but you only get 12. So
And those are all capsules, because
these are all capsules.
I just kind of did that quick Google capsules. You can put it in orange juice. They say that helps cut the taste or make the taste better, because you already said it was disgusting. So people are adding it in juice. You make it with tea, all these different ways. The one thing you don't do is smoke it, right?
So currently, right now, we have not seen any forms that I know of, unless maybe there's information I'm not aware of. Smoking is not the lead use. There has been some reported cases where somebody has, but it's not very common. Like you had mentioned, the most common form is through a tea or through a juice. So it's more of the oral consumption. That seems to be the most common form of using it. And with the orange juice, this is a little extra information. The acid in the orange juice actually gets it through your blood system faster. So it gets into your brain. So that's sort of one of the added benefits of using the orange juice.
And the average serving size that consumers report is 3 to 5 grams. And for those that are using it, obviously, to manage acute and chronic pain, it can be 12 to 16 grams a day.
Okay, so I just did a quick Google. Mayo Clinic seems to be completely and totally against this. They're like, this is the worst thing they ever heard of. I'm just saying, everybody could Google it for themselves, but we got to do our own homework. My last question has to do with our young people. Are we finding this in schools? Are we finding that our children are getting access to kratom, since you can just buy it at a local store, I guess, or the gas station? I'm just not clear about that. Thank you.
I'll comment on that. Thank you. Well, we're seeing, actually, the organization I work for, we do drug prevention in schools. It's starting to become more aware with the young people, but we're not seeing it as an all out-and-out issue right now, but it is starting to grow. And a lot of times you're going to find it only in smoke shops, and smoke shops by law are not supposed to allow anybody under 21 into their store altogether. But gas stations have it, and a lot of gas stations, they're not buying cigarettes, they're not going to ID them, if they ID them then, you know. And this one package here that he showed you, the smaller one, the owner of the store actually gave it to him. He said, here, try it, you can have this for free. Now, what are they doing to other people? They're giving it away.
So Representative Young, if I could just comment on the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic, nor the Cleveland Clinic, nor WebMD or the American Medical Association, none have done independent research on kratom. We, in fact, support research. We went to the Mayo Clinic and offered to help fund some research. They declined because they rely on the FDA. And the FDA has disseminated information that is, by characterization of the Assistant Secretary for Health, outdated and insufficient to demonstrate the claims that they're making. So it's a little bit of a cycle where the Mayo Clinic will repeat what the FDA says. They've not done independent research. And now we're seeing WebMD has acknowledged that there are health benefits to the utilization of kratom. First time they've done that in years. And it's because of the growing popularity of it and the recognition with science that it can be beneficial. We think it should be regulated so that kids can't get it. We think it needs to be regulated so that you're not adulterating it to spike sales and enrich people at the risk of consumers.
All right, thank you. Thanks for coming up and testifying today.
Thank you.
Seeing no more business in front of the Committee on Regulatory Reform is adjourned.